Welcome back to the Create From Rest podcast. I am your host, Rachel Fehrenbach, and this is episode 57. At the time of this recording, it is June 16th. Summer is underway. Spring activities have fallen off of our calendar. We have new activities, responsibilities, appointments, all of the things. And I have had to do some recalibration and re-finessing of things on my calendar. And the framework that I use to help me evaluate what we're giving our time and attention and our energy to is a simple one: body, home, fields, tables. So today I want to go into what exactly this framework is, how I use it, and how I think it could benefit you too. Let's get into it. For the longest time, the word priority made me squirm because everything felt like a priority. Everything. All the responsibilities I had, all the things I was carrying, all the things I wanted to accomplish, all the expectations people had of me or the expectations I had of myself, all of it felt like it was urgent and necessary. And so it was very hard for me to figure out, what do I give my attention to? What do I give my time to? What do I put my energy into? And so I did what I always do, and I went and started researching, how do other people get their acts together? How do they categorize their lives? How do they decide this is the thing to focus on, but I also am keeping track of this thing over here? And I came across a lot of different methods over the years, and I tried implementing quite a few of them. I'm going to read off a list of the ones I've come across in my lifetime. The Wheel of Life, the Eisenhower Matrix, the 8+1 Life Balance Framework, the 7 Hills, the ABCDE method, the F framework, so faith, family, finances, friends, the 333 method. These all, even the calendar, the 333 method, even the planner that I use and actually really enjoy using, Cultivate What Matters, even they have about 7 or 8 different categories, I can't even remember right now, of different areas you could put goals into. And then they give you an extra space for another category that maybe they haven't thought of. And I have to say that every time I came across this framework, I would start to try to put priorities into those. And I would, like, without fail, become overwhelmed, like, immediately. Because anytime I tried to make any goals for those particular areas, or if I, like, just listed different priorities or responsibilities I had in those areas, like, it was a lot. Like, we're talking between 7 and 10 different categories. And then you have, like, your top 3 goals in each category. And it was getting exhausting. That's like 30 things to tend to grow in, to keep moving forward on. And every time I did it, I would get overwhelmed. And I would think, oh my gosh, I can start moving forward in one area, but then something else would get left behind. I would make movement on one area and forget the other. And I just kept thinking, like, somebody's got to have it out there. Somebody has got to know how to keep everything in check, how to keep making movement forward, and how to, like, prioritize everything. And I kept looking, and of course, like, everything fell a little short. And fast forward to, we started practicing Sabbath, and that kind of helped reframe things a little bit for me. I started seeing things a little bit bigger, on a bigger scale, meaning, like, I started recognizing that I had more time than I thought to different things. So that helped me reframe that. And we'll talk about that in a future episode. But what you just need to understand is that, like, practicing Sabbath kind of shifted things a little bit for me. And I started feeling the permission to create again. And so I started giving space for that. But I still, if it came down to it, if something else was a priority, I would let the writing slip. I did not make the writing a priority because when I ranked things, it felt very like I was just throwing spaghetti at the wall, but I kind of had this, like, not generic, but this sense of, like, well, your relationships matter, so I need to put priorities to those. Or, serving your community matters, serving others is important, but so is exercising. But exercising is, like, it's kind of for me, and if somebody else needs something, then I can go do that. And anyways, all that to say, it was very, um, it was just hard to navigate. It was hard to navigate. There was too many different things to pay attention to, too many different categories, and they were all like equal. So all that to say, it was very convoluted. I didn't find anything very helpful, and I just felt very conflicted most of the time about what I should be spending my time to. I kind of knew what I was supposed to be spending my time to, but everything always felt like it was in conflict with one another. Fast forward to I'm sitting in church one day, and the pastor's talking about our church valuing beauty, goodness, and truth, like cultivating those things. Now, this is a concept that's been in the Christian tradition for quite some time. This is not new to our church, but it is something that has often been talked about in the Christian circles, is this idea of cultivating truth, beauty, and goodness. And that's our divine directive. That's what we are meant to do as humanity. And you've heard me talk about that too, about we've been designed to create. And part of that is bringing forth beautiful things, creating goodness that impacts the world around us and points to God's truth. And so he's talking about this, and I volunteer for our church as the communications lead. And so, of course, my mind went to, oh, I need to update the website. Man, I wonder how we could capture some of this on the website. If I was going to organize a page on the website, like how would I organize that information? How would we talk about creating beauty, truth, and goodness? And like, what do we create that over? Like the mission of the church, what are the things that we do? How do we create beauty, truth, and goodness in each of those? Of course, so I'm just like, obviously not really paying attention to the sermon at this point. I'm just kind of thinking this through as he's talking about these principles. And as I'm thinking about this, how would I categorize? Like, how would I identify this on a website? How would I categorize this? How would I organize this on a website? All of a sudden, it was there. Body, home, fields, tables. I could see it almost like a drop-down menu on a website. And I realized that this was not necessarily for the church, that this was something that I was trying to figure out for me. I was trying to figure out, what does creative stewardship look like? How would I categorize that? How could I show that in my own life? And I was like sitting in the service and just completely, I kind of wanted him to hurry up and get done with his sermon so we could go home, so I could kind of put this into action, if I'm being completely honest. So that's what we did. When we got home, we pulled out a whiteboard, we put the 4 categories at the top, and we just started writing everything down that we had responsibility for, everything that we were carrying, the things that we weren't carrying that we wanted to carry, the things that we were carrying that we didn't want to carry anymore, the things that we were hoping to do, the things we wanted to grow in, the things that we wanted to accomplish. We just put it all on that board, and we were able to put it under one of these categories. And as I was looking at it, I was like, thank goodness. This is simple. I can wrap my brain around this. It's 4 simple areas. I can keep track of this. But what was even more important, as I sat there on the couch looking at this whiteboard, my husband just making little notes here and there, I realized that the beauty in this framework was not necessarily how simple the categories were, but in the fact that it was a order to it. There's a flow to it. First came body, then home, then fields, then tables. And when we get that order right, it helps us to make decisions. It helps to, and because there's an order to it, it is able to identify what is the priority. What is the thing that I need to give attention to? How do I layer things onto my calendar? This framework gives you that answer. So what I want to do right now is go a little bit more into detail with each of these different categories. So I want to start with body. Now, I will admit I have not been the best about this category. Often throughout the years, I've treated my body as this obstacle to get around in order to do the real life, in order to do the things that I really wanted to do, in order to actually live. I had to deal with this body. It was a necessary evil to take care of. That's how I treated it. I have come to embrace the fact that we are embodied souls. We are not just physical, we are not just spiritual, we are both. And they interact with one another very intimately. How well physically we are doing affects our emotional health. How well we're doing physically affects our mental health. And vice versa. How well we're doing mentally affects our physical nervous system. How well we are doing spiritually affects our physical well being. How well we're doing spiritually affects how we're doing emotionally. Like they're all connected with one another. When I started to understand this, like when I really started to think about this, that I'm an embodied soul, things like the fact that learning about scripture and the nerdy parts of like scripture, how it makes me feel closer to God, that suddenly made sense. Because what I was doing was growing my mind, stewarding my mind, and in turn, it was affecting my spirit, my relationship with the Lord, and my understanding of who He is and who I am in relationship to Him. And so we cannot take these two things apart. We are both physical and spirit, and we have to see that together they affect one another so importantly. We're not talking about keeping the body from falling apart. We're talking about stewarding the body in a way that allows it to make an impact on the world around us, that allows it to bring forth beauty in the things it does, that allows it to create goodness in the things that it executes, allows it to point towards truth in the ways that it interacts with the world around it. So taking our embodied souls and stewarding it becomes an ultimate necessity. We have to start here because this is our life. Without our physical being, without the spiritual being, without this embodied soul that we are, we cannot live a life. It is our life. Our life is not outside of us. This is the thing I'm pointing myself like this body, this embodied soul is the thing that is the life. And we have to tend to that. We have to take care of it. It is beyond just making sure you're sleeping and eating. It's caring from it in a way that allows it to continue to do the work that God has called you to. It is not a necessary evil. It is not a means to an end. It's the very thing that God has asked you to steward. Without caring for this embodied soul, every other area of stewardship breaks down because we cannot execute on the stewardship that's been given to us. We cannot have good, healthy relationships. We can't grow those if we aren't first healthy in our relationship with the Lord. We cannot have good, healthy relationships if we're not emotionally regulated and our nervous system is regulated. Those are connected. We cannot steward our fields well if physically we are not tending to our bodies. We cannot show up to the work that we're supposed to do with a clear mind and with energy if we're not nurturing our bodies well. And these areas of stewardship all begin to break down when we do not care for our embodied soul. So that body has to be the priority. Now, there is a difference between stewarding your body and making the stewardship of your body your identity. And I think we all know these people that have made exercise and being healthy and all these things, they're relying on that. They are making that their identity or their source of security and safety. And that's not what God asks of us. He asks us to acknowledge that we are a physical being, that we have an embodied soul that is in a physical, limited body. And we surrender in that. We care for it, we steward it, but we ultimately realize that we have limits and we honor those limits. And in doing so, we show our physical dependency on God and our surrender in that and our trust in all of that. The next area of stewardship is the home. Now, the home has two components, the people who live in it with you and the actual habitat itself. Now, why am I pulling the people that live within the home as the next area of stewardship for you? We have certain relationships that are interconnected with us, specifically our spouse and our kids. Our spouse is somebody that we are an embodied soul that is sacredly connected to another embodied soul through marriage. And that makes us one flesh in God's eyes. When we married our spouse, we committed to the health and well-being of one another and stewarding that relationship, not just maintaining it, not just becoming roommates, but really cultivating the marriage and becoming people who are two sides of the same coin, people who are a unit, who are working together to create and bring forth beauty together. That's what a marriage is all about. And so it is super important that you steward this relationship next. And then there's your kids who are also interconnected on you when they are in your home. When they move out, that's a different story and things shift slightly. Relationship still needs to be cultivated and maintained, but it's different from when they're interconnected with you on a daily basis, where they depend on you day in and day out. Those relationships have a different impact on you and have to be stewarded differently. Those kids depend on you, and that's why that is another area of stewardship that comes before the others. Now, when we're talking about just roommates, or maybe you still live at home with your parents, those relationships are still important to cultivate because you're literally in the same space, sharing the same resources, being in one another's bubbles day in and day out. And those relationships are important to tend to and care for because they have the possibility of positively and negatively impacting your embodied soul on a daily basis. And vice versa, you can impact them. And so keeping that relationship healthy and stewarded well is important because you guys are utilizing a resource and stewarding that resource together. Now, the home is not just relationships. The home is a habitat. It is a place where it protects our embodied soul, can nourish our embodied soul through meals, through intellectual pursuits, through hanging out with friends, emotionally can nourish us. The home is a place that growth can happen. The home is the place from which the environment from which other things happen. Our fields happen, our tables happen. These things are extensions from the home. We leave the four walls of our home, but we return to it. And so it is important that we look at our habitat as not just something to keep in check and keep from falling apart, but something that we steward into an environment and a resource that allows us as an embodied soul to continue to thrive, because that will only maximize the efforts that we put into other areas. All right, so we've stewarded our bodies and we've stewarded our homes, and that allows us now to steward our field. Now, a field is something that we invest in with the goal to reap some sort of provision from it. Most of the time, this is financial. But you may have a field that provides you a resource in a different way. And that's why you put the effort into it, because there is a resource that is given to you that is important to your family and that then helps you steward your bodies and homes better. So I don't want to box this one in, but the key here is that it's something that you're investing in with the idea that you're going to have a return from that. There's going to be some kind of provision, some kind of resource provided that you then use to continue to steward your body and your home. In a second, we're going to talk a little bit about communities. So just keep this in mind that from the generosity, from the overflow, from the abundance of that field, that is when we invest into our communities. The other key thing about fields that I want you to understand is this is an area where you both invest into it and reap the benefit while also serving others. It's such a beautiful concept that God has created, that we can work, we can generate, we can do something that creates a resource for us financially most of the time, that also simultaneously provides a service for somebody else. It serves somebody else. So when I write a novel and I sell it, that money, I take that money and it goes to us stewarding our bodies and our home as a family, but it also serves the reader because it encourages them. It entertains them. It makes them think about questions about identity and purpose and belonging on a deeper level. So I'm serving somebody while also benefiting in a way that helps me steward my body and my home. It's such a cool fact. And out of the abundance of all that, I get to serve my community as well. One of the things I want to point out is that as stay-at-home moms, we have a tendency to think of our home management as our work. And I want to just push back on that just slightly. I would like to push back on it a little bit because we still have to steward our bodies and our habitats regardless of the roles that we carry. Regardless of if we are moms, regardless of if we're married, regardless if we work in an office, work from home, stay at home, or any of the combination of those. We still have to steward our bodies and our homes. Now that stewardship might look different based off of the roles that you carry. But the reality is they still exist. The stewardship still exists. What is not the same is the fields that you can invest in. I just want to offer that as a consideration, that if you have up until this point considered your home management your field, I would hope that you would see it more as stewarding your habitat in your home. And instead, consider what fields can you invest in that would have some kind of return, some kind of resource for you and your family. Some resource that would benefit your body stewardship, some resource that would benefit your home stewardship. Now that can be very creative. So for me, what does that look like? I am a stay-at-home mom. I have to steward my body. I have to steward my home. But when it comes to my fields, I actually have 3 of them. I have a business that I own with 2 other women. I have this business of authorship. So this podcast, the books that I write. In both of those fields, I invest in order to have a financial return. But then I have home education, which I invest in as a educator into my children's. I'm investing as an educator into their lives. And the return, the provision that I am hoping for is that they have a provision of education that then impacts the stewardship of their minds, of their embodied souls, their character, and all of that. And so I see that as my work. Now, for them, education, school is not their job. That's not their job. And for a while, we called it that for them. We said, oh, your work is to show up and do school. And we realized that that's not true because we want children who will never stop being learners. We want them to be lifelong learners. We want them to be lovers of learning. We want them to be always curious and constantly growing. And so we realized that we had to switch. Their jobs were not to show up and do their schoolwork. Their stewardship was of their minds, growing their minds, taking in that information, asking curious questions, continuing to learn, asking themselves what they were interested in, asking what do they want to learn next. That's their stewardship of their embodied soul. It also has to do with their character. And so these things, these lessons that they're learning, as I am home educating them, I'm investing into their education. That's my field, with the goal that it will provide a resource that positively impacts their stewardship of their bodies, of their minds, of their soul, their character, all of that. And so the question would be, what is your field or fields that God has entrusted to you? What talents is He asking you to invest? What opportunities is He asking you to invest in that will provide some kind of resource that will positively impact your stewardship of your body and your home? Okay, now table is last in the flow because it is the extension of your stewardship. These are the communities you care about, the volunteer commitments, the friend groups, the neighborhood. Table is where you're generous with the resources your field produces and the life your body and home sustain. Table stewardship is about showing up for others, but it's also about receiving. It's letting people in, it's building together. And I love to think about these as tables rather than just communities, Because when you're sitting across from a table, you see somebody eye to eye, face to face. And it makes you realize that they're another human that you're talking to. What a precious thing that we get to do, to be an image bearer connecting with another image bearer. Now, when it comes to tables, we can do a couple things. We can either completely ignore this area. We don't participate in any kind of community. We don't do any kind of volunteering. We're just kind of inwardly focused. Well, you miss out on so much when you do that. I just want to say that. I know some people are like, oh, people, oh, there's so much work. They are, but there's something beautiful about connecting with other people, sitting across from somebody, seeing another image bearer sitting across from you, and connecting in a way that is just unique and only something that really humans do. I just think it's so special. We can do that. We can just ignore it completely, but we can also sometimes join way too many tables. We can try to sit at all the tables. And so we bop around from table to table. And we never get to go really deep because we're just kind of flirting from one thing to the next, flirting, whatever the word is, from one table to the next. And, this isn't always a bad thing, but sometimes it can feel really chaotic. I'm not saying only have a few tables to sit at, but I'm just saying make sure that you are allocating for enough opportunity to go deeper in some of those tables, not just staying shallow in all of them. Yeah, and I think sometimes we can get ourselves into too many different volunteer opportunities, trying to be helpful in all the areas, and tables don't all have to look the same. You can volunteer in one community and just show up and be kind in another. So I just caution you on how many tables you sit at. And then the third thing that we sometimes can do is that we can sit at the wrong tables. Tables that we're not supposed to be sitting at, that we, for whatever reason, have ended up in those tables, and maybe that's not where God has you to be. And you know what those are. There's just this unrest about it. I'm not saying that conflict and difficulty is an automatic sign that you're in the wrong place, but when that is the norm, that's a sign that you're in the wrong place. So just a couple things to consider, and as you're thinking about the tables that you're sitting at. Those are the 4 areas: body, home, field, tables. It's so simple. But what it does is it gives you a flow, it gives you a framework, and it gives you questions, a way to name what area a demand belongs to and evaluate it. And so some examples, I'm just going to read off some examples. Should I take on this church committee? I mean, that's a table. So the question is, how is your table right now? Do you have too many? Does this specific commitment allow you to serve that table really well, or are you just filling a need? Maybe you're not supposed to be filling that need. I want to write, but the house is a wreck. So that's where a field is pulling against a home. And the question becomes, what one actually needs you right now? Because sometimes the house does need to be taken into account, and you need to pull back, and you need to steward that better. But sometimes it's just maintenance that needs to be done, and you can just leave the dishes in the sink while you attend to the stewardship that you have blocked off on your calendar for your field. And when that's done, then you can go do the dishes. The dishes will still be there. That's a management. So being able to identify, like, oh, wait, there's a breakdown here in my home. We need to take care of this. We need to steward this better. Versus, oh, this is just maintenance that can maybe wait while I steward this field over here. I feel guilty resting. And that's a body stewardship issue. Are you treating your body's need as legitimate, or as an inconvenience to your productivity? I also think that would go into the question about exercise. Ooh, I think I need to exercise more, but it's really just hard to fit in the 30-minute walk. Let me just be honest with you. You can find 30 minutes to move your body. It is important. It is necessity. There are not that many things in your day that are so demanding that you cannot find 30 minutes. If there are, then you need to start saying no to some things. All right. That was me getting a little bossy there, so I'm sorry I hope you don't mind me stepping on your toes a little bit. You know what? I will just say this right now. I have had the same thing told me. because I was the one who was saying, oh, I'm just too busy to get this exercise in. And it's like, nope, you need to make this happen. And there are not that many things in your day that are that demanding that you absolutely cannot find the time for this. You have to steward your body first, then your home, then your field, then your table. My kid's education feels like it's crushing me. Is that a field issue, your workload as the teacher, or a body issue? You're depleted and everything feels heavier than it is. When we can start asking these questions, what area of stewardship is this that this is affecting right now? Then we start knowing how to attend to that need, and we can flow it out in the right order. You can check, is the earlier area, is the body being neglected? Is the home being neglected? Then we can write that flow. And if something breaks down earlier, then the downflow is definitely going to get impacted. But when we have things in the right order and the right flow, then we can properly steward the things that we've been entrusted with. The reality is your calendar is not going to be just one and done. It constantly shifts. It ebbs and flows. Things change. Seasons change. Different responsibilities change. Different appointments and activities change. And all of that means that your calendar has to constantly shift. What the framework does, it doesn't produce perfect balance. What it does is it produces awareness. It produces awareness that allows you to make intentional decisions, to move things into the right alignment, into the right flow, so that you are making decisions and taking action, not from guilt or fear, striving or hustling, but from a proper place of resting in God's provision, acknowledging your limitations, and understanding that none of this belongs to you anyways. It all belongs to the Lord, and you've just been entrusted with it for a time. So this is what I want to leave you with. I want to leave you with the same exercise my husband and I did way back that one Sunday, where we took a whiteboard and we just labeled it and put everything down in all the categories. Now, you can get yourself a whiteboard. You can put the 4 categories at the top, or a piece of paper works too, just fine, and just list everything. Or you can go download my 15-minute margin method. It has a space for that already designed in the download. You can download it for free, rachelfahrenbach.com/margin, and it gives you a place to put each of these things down in those categories. I want you to list everything you're responsible for, everything you wish you had time for, every calling you feel. Put it all down. Because when you see it in front of you, on paper, on the whiteboard, whatever it is, that helps you to articulate where are the areas that maybe we're overburdened on, maybe the areas that we're under on. Do we have the proper flow going on? Does our calendar reflect the things that we want to carry? Does our calendar reflect the things that we truly do carry? Or is it we're carrying these things in an invisible way where we're doing them, but we're not giving time to them? It just allows you to ask all those questions and to get really clear and honest. And when you get clear and honest, you can take steps to make intentional decisions to remove things, to say no to things, and to say yes to things, so that your stewardship aligns with the calling that God has placed on your life. Now, before we go, I want to pray this over us. Lord Jesus, through our lives and in our creative stewardship, may your kingdom come. See you next week. Bye.